So I want to tell you a little bit about what happens, sort of a day in the life of a utility company or the grid in general. And it'll sort of help you understand how Adapt Energy is going to make a really positive impact on the grid and really help the utility companies. So a utility company in most cases uses a nuclear power plant and generates about 90% of all the power that you'll need during the peak time. Now, it's important to recognize what peak time means. Again, that's that time where people are home, they got home from work, and they're doing their laundry, and they're doing all their electronics and surfing the internet and those types of things, watching TV and whatnot. Well, the grid operators, the utility companies, they're creating 90% of what we need during peak time. What happens when we get to peak time? They gotta make that other 10% up. That's made up using what are called peaker plants. All right, so we've got our grid running during the day, generating 90% from a nuclear power plant. But here's a statistic that is going to blow your mind. We in the United States only use 50% of that 90% that is generated from the nuclear power plants during the day. The sad part about that, and the sad truth of that, is the other 40%, or the other, say, 50% of the 90%, is literally shoved into the ground. It's called curtailing. They actually just shove it into the ground. It's completely wasted. Why are we wasting that much energy? It's really simple. We have no way to store it. There's no place to put it. They have to get rid of it. Now, let me add something else to that. Federal government has done a great thing for all of us consumers. They've given us a federal tax credit of 30% right now. It's going to go down over the next few years, but people are buying solar, and they're putting solar on their home. Guess when they're using solar power? Yeah, during the day, when the grid doesn't actually need it. Now we're generating a whole bunch of power we don't actually need. We shove it into the ground. And then on top of that, we've got a bunch of people with solar who don't need the solar power during the day, so they give it back to the grid, and the utility company has to pay for it. All this is happening simply because we don't need that much power during the day. But then here we get into peak time. And during peak time, that's when we need it. So guess what happens? A peaker plant gets turned on. That peaker plant typically is a petroleum-based plant. So it can be turned on and turned off relatively quickly. It's sort of like a generator. Now, when they kick this peaker plant on, that's what's taking care of that extra 10% of power that needs to be made for peak time. Petroleum-based, high emissions, it's really bad for us, and it's expensive as well. That's why a lot of utility companies have moved to doing high tariff times, and your costs go up during this peak time because it is very expensive for them as well. Guess what fixes all of that? Home battery storage. Decentralizing a storage mechanism allows us to take our solar power, store it in the battery for use later on during peak time. It helps the utility companies, it helps the grid, it sort of decentralizes and decarbonizes. It changes everything and can truly solve the whole grid challenge that we have. Now, in order to really move the needle there, we are going to have a lot of homeowners jump on this opportunity to have both battery storage and solar. I truly believe solar has no place in a home without battery storage. So we're very, very excited to be working with battery manufacturers and working with inverter manufacturers and these types of things to add our Adapt Energy intelligence to the whole mix. Because once you are storing that solar power and using it, we can now control how much battery life we have at the end of the day based on what we have on and off. So again, solar, battery storage solves that whole problem. That's just a little bit more about the grid and how putting battery storage in a home can help.